I sat at the far end of the table, so close to the kitchen I could hear the dishwasher rattle with every slammed plate. Someone laughed too loud, silver clinking on porcelain. Amanda smirking as she raised her glass. Well, at least she's here now, scrubbing floors instead of files. Heat crawled up my neck. I didn't answer. I just gripped the stem of my cracked wine glass, eyes down, chewing silence while the forks hit the plates in slow, deliberate stabs. No one asked about the years I gave them. No one remembered the late nights counting their debts, saving them from ruin. I sat perfectly still, tasting copper and shame. Then the door opened. A guest I'd never met stopped mid-step, gaze locking on me, voice shaking. Ma'am? Director? Every conversation died. Forks froze. Eyes widened in disbelief. Before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Just say hi in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. And if this story moves something in you, consider subscribing. I sat pressed against the end of the table, my chair nudged up to the narrow space by the swinging kitchen door that kept letting in drafts of cold air with every tray that passed. The overhead chandelier threw a thick yellow haze across the room, dulling the edges, casting half of my face in blurred light, while the other half disappeared into shadow. I watched it roll over polished silverware, softening their shine to wax. From here, I heard laughter catch and break, forks scraping porcelain in awkward rhythm. The words floating above me felt far away, meant for someone else. They called my name once, voices pitched politely, stretched thin over forced smiles. My mother leaned in, pressing a careful kiss to my cheek, the scent of her old perfume clinging too long before she pulled away with a quiet, "I'm so glad you're here." Already looking past me, an uncle gave a single pat on the shoulder, hand heavy but hollow, eyes sliding off to find someone more interesting. A cousin tilted her head with a rehearsed grin, asking how things were going in a voice that trailed away before I could answer. Down the table, Brian laughed, arms slung over the back of his chair, his glass lifted to applause that rang clean and easy. I opened my mouth to speak once, but the moment drifted past me, snatched up by a joke I wasn't in on, cut off by the clink of a knife on glass for another toast in his name. My fingers tightened around the stem of my wine glass, feeling the tiny crack there catch on my thumb. I forced myself to set it down slowly, aligning it with the fold of my napkin. Somewhere farther down, a fork slipped and fell, the sound sharp, followed by quick apologies and soft laughter that faded too fast. I shifted back into the edge of the dim light, back against the cool wood of the chair, eyes drawn to the window behind me, watching my own blurred reflection hover and fade in the glass. I sat where the table narrowed, chair angled too close to the window that let in slow drafts. The glass rattled once when someone passed, and I watched the edge of my napkin shift in the breeze. Candlelight pooled at the far end, warm and crowded, but here it died before reaching my hands. My plate sat slightly off-center, catching the shadow of the floral arrangement meant for the middle seats. I saw the family photo wall behind them, frames polished, everyone arranged just so, except one corner with a gap where I should have been. "Elaine?" someone asked, voice thin with courtesy, as if they were checking if that was still my name. Their smile flickered, then fell away before I could nod. Another chair scraped, bodies shifting to make room for others, leaving mine crooked against the wall. I heard them joke about the roast, forks tapping glass with a clean, bright note that didn't reach the side. A dish was passed my way late, its edge slick with gravy, so I set it down at arm's length. No one noticed. When they spoke about last year's party, they mentioned who planned it, who brought the wine, but left the space empty where my hands had worked. "Oh, that was Madison, wasn't it?" an aunt offered, eyes darting, correcting someone who had almost said my name. Laughter rose, cut across the table in a clean line, bounced off the high ceiling and fell cold on my side. My mother gestured for more bread at the same moment I tried to speak, words dissolving as the basket passed by. They praised Thomas for the seating chart, how thoughtful he was, someone clinking a spoon against their glass in gentle applause. My fingers tightened on the stem of mine, thumb worrying a ridge of dried condensation until it smudged. I swallowed hard, adjusting my knife so its reflection wouldn't catch my eyes. The napkin in my lap felt damp where I'd folded it twice, smoothed it flat for something to do. I caught the gleam of silverware as someone toasted, the words muffled by distance, by the hollow of my chest. My gaze dropped to the faint water ring on the cloth, where my glass had sat too long, fingers hovering before wiping it once, slow and deliberate. A chair near me shifted, scuffing against the floor, but no one looked this way. The window to my side clouded with breath I didn't feel, showing only a dim outline of me blurred into the dark beyond. They asked, "Isabella, could you stand there, just by the head of the table?" And the whole room seemed to shift to make space for her. The chandelier's low glow pooled warm on her shoulders, threw soft shadows behind her on the wall, clear and steady. She smiled, modest, careful, and they called her name twice more. "Isabella, really? This was all your idea? Then Isabella deserves the credit." The words floated in the hush before the first ripple of laughter, gentle and approving, fork set down to clap politely. I watched from the side, my chair pressed against the seam where carpet met tile, the edge of the tablecloth falling into my lap like an afterthought. The eyes went all one direction. My uncle raised his glass to her with a nod that made the others follow. The tink of crystal, deliberate, unified. Even my mother's voice softened as she repeated, "Isabella's so thoughtful," breath catching just enough to let pride in. My name landed once, offhand. "Oh, and Emily's here too." No inflection, just filler before she turned back, voice bright. I shifted once, knees bumping the table leg, the scrape swallowed by another round of laughter. The light where I sat felt thin, shadows puddling under the chair, the flicker of the candle beside me bending away, casting my side of the table into something dull and unclaimed. My hand found the stem of my glass, thumb sliding over the curve, but I didn't lift it. I felt the heat in my throat, the tight click of swallowing words I hadn't shaped yet. I drew in breath, opened my mouth as the laughter dipped. But someone started another story about Isabella, how she'd handled the florist, the menu, the timing so no one felt rushed. Their voices wrapped around her, anchored her in the center. My hand closed tighter on the glass until the rim bit back. I let the air out slow, my fingers leaving a print in the condensation, the cloth beneath going dark with water I didn't notice. Beyond them, the window reflected it all, but wrong. The room behind me, warped in the glass, faces stretched and doubled. Isabella's figure crisp where she stood, my own outline half-formed, swallowed in the smear of light. The applause felt slower this time, drawn out. Hands coming together then falling apart with ragged timing, fading to soft hush that left only breath and shifting chairs. Her shadow held shape on the wall behind her, long and sure. Mine bent over the edge of the chair, broken where the table blocked it from view. Not knowing that so much show, where I didn't do it doing Charles discussed right it. But all the charred days, I leaned in a little, fingers tracing the rim of my glass, thumb resting where the chill had left a small ring of water on the cloth. I cleared my throat once, too soft, then tried again, letting the words come slow, careful, eyes shifting to find someone looking back. I remember when my voice caught, softer than I meant, the syllables pressed thin as if afraid of being real. I shifted my weight, angled my knees toward them, hoping for space to finish, watching the candlelight pool dimly at my end of the table. My fingers flexed, the glass tilted slightly in my grip, but I didn't lift it. I tried again, almost a whisper. There was that time, letting the memory crack open just enough to spill a hint of warmth. My eyes caught movement, hunting for someone to catch the thread, to pick it up with me. The words barely shaped before a laugh cut across the table, sharp and bright, followed by a clink of glasses raised with practiced ease. Isabella, you really outdid yourself," someone crowed, voice rolling over mine without malice. "Just wait." Another joined in, repeating her name with a grin. "Truly, Isabella, incredible." The words landed clean and full in the space where mine had tried to grow. The candle nearest them flared as they leaned in, casting a warm gleam across their faces, while mine slipped back into shadow. I let my mouth close, teeth resting on my tongue, air pressing out of my lungs in a small, tight sound. I looked down, thumbs smoothing over the wet ring again, eyes blurring at the tiny ripples of water that didn't settle. I pulled my hand away, laying it flat on the folded napkin, as though I could iron out the lines there. The laughter kept spilling, not cruel, just full, the chairs shifting as bodies turned toward her. I let my back straighten, slow and deliberate, my spine catching on the chair rail, the cushion cold through my dress. My eyes darted once more around the table, catching the edge of a mirrored serving tray that showed me cut in half by glare, my own face warped, small behind the blur of glass. I breathed once, deep, held it, let it go like I was folding paper along a crease. My fingers found the corner of a napkin, smoothed it flat, and let it go. The laughter softened, stretching out in echoes that faded down the long, linen-covered table, leaving only the hush of shifting chairs and the dim light that flickered twice before steadying. They said, "Isabella, really, it's perfect." And someone else repeated it, voice warm, glass raised with an easy chime that traveled the length of the table. The light found her, lingered, brushed gold across her hair, while the rest of us sat in a softened hush, forks pausing just long enough to listen, to nod. I watched their faces tilt toward her, the lines around their mouths relaxing, laughter pooling in low ripples that clung to the corners of the room. I thought I saw someone lean in closer, shoulders turned, leaving the space beside me cooled in the half-shade the chandelier didn't bother filling. I let my eyes trace the curve of my glass, felt it press lightly against my lip without tilting. My breath caught there, held, then eased out. It was quiet on my side of the table, except for the echo of her name, clear, brighter the second time someone offered it, with a small toast that made them all laugh. I blinked, slow, felt the napkin under my fingers shift when I twitched to say something, but the words stayed thin, slack, a shape I couldn't finish. There was that memory, old and soft at the edges, like it belonged here once, like I could have said, like I almost did. The laughter bent away from me, caught in the smooth walls, and bouncing back too blurred to follow. I leaned back half an inch, spine pressing into the cool of the chair. My fingers found the fold of the cloth again, smoothed it flat without meaning to, leaving a small crease behind. I thought maybe there was a moment I could try, if I chose it carefully, if I let the words fall right. But they didn't. I let the glass rest on the table, stem warm from my hand, but unmoved. The rim shining dully in the flicker of a candle I wasn't close enough to feel. I watched her mouth move, shaping thanks that sounded light, but filled every space that had waited. Someone clapped once, hesitant, but real. And the others joined in, soft and scattered like falling leaves. I sat with my shoulder turned just enough away, not leaving, not quite staying, my breath low in my chest. My thumb traced the edge of the plate, found a chip no one had noticed, pressed against it until I felt the small give of glaze. I tried to lift my gaze, and failed halfway, let it fall to the shadow on the floor, where the light cast her silhouette clear and mine barely touched the edge before giving up. I watched the light hold steady on them, warm and full, the chandeliers spilling gold that clung to their glasses as they lifted them, catching every smile, every nod that pressed the air into soft ripples of laughter that reached me like muffled radio static, edges dull, words blurred. I let my gaze move slow, past the curve of the table, past hands resting easy, past the napkin someone dropped and picked up without pause. No eyes finding mine, no space left open. My fingers held the cloth in my lap, smoothing it once, folding it flat along the seam, the crease sharp beneath my thumb. I didn't look up, as I placed it carefully on the edge of my plate, straightening it though no one watched. The glass at my elbow glowed where the candle caught it, the wine inside still as water in a well untouched, the light bending along its surface in quiet lines. I shifted my weight slow, the chair creaking low, felt the cushion resist before giving. The scrape of its feet lost under another burst of laughter that rose, scattered, settled again. I reached for my coat draped behind me, fingers catching on the sleeve, tugging it free in small movements, careful not to let the fabric fall. I let it rest over my arm, the weight dragging at my shoulder. My other hand flattened against the table edge, pushing back with enough pressure to make the chair inch, felt the wood under my palm, cold from where I hadn't touched it all evening. I stood without hurry, knees unlocking one at a time, the hem of my dress brushing the leg of the chair, before I eased back just enough to clear it. The room didn't shift, didn't pause, didn't hush. The glass in front of me stayed full, catching the glow of the candles that still burned in a line down the center. Flames, steady, light, unbroken. I glanced once more at the empty space I left behind. The chair nudged in, the napkin folded right, the glass reflecting the low light without tremor. My steps were small, careful. The tap of my shoe on the wood soft, almost lost beneath the low swell of voices. My hand found the door frame, fingers curling once then straightening, pressing the latch just enough to feel its give without pushing it open all the way. The coat settled heavier along my arm, the fabric sliding against itself with a muted whisper. Behind me, the laughter carried on, the clink of silverware in easy rhythm. The light in the chandelier as warm as ever, falling now on an empty chair, its surface smoothed, waiting. The glass beside it holding its glow with no one to lift it. I watched from where the light broke softer, eyes adjusting to the way it fell fuller on her shoulders, how it found the curve of her cheek as she leaned in, arranging the flowers in the center with careful fingers, pressing the stems just so, pausing to tilt the vase until it caught the candlelight right, a glow pooling golden, the flame steady in its cup. I heard someone say thank you, voice lifted, naming her once, then again as if to be sure, laughter rolling easy, silverware clinking, a toast unfinished, but enough. My glass was warm against my palm, sweat gathering at its base, my thumb sliding over the line where moisture pooled before falling away. I felt my eyes trace the way she set the napkin, edge straight, fold precise, the same fold I remembered once, but her hands, not mine, smoothing it, fingers flexing and pressing, so natural no one watched. Someone misnamed the dish she brought, the wrong credit given, but no one corrected it. They just nodded, eyes trained on her, conversation catching in small low bursts like matches striking. I let my breath out slow, the exhale catching at the back of my teeth, watching her move, tilting the breadbasket, offering it with a smile that curved true. The whole table shifting half an inch toward her, chairs scraping softly, the sound lost in the hum of talk. I thought I might say something, felt the first curl of my tongue against the roof of my mouth, but my fingers tightened around the glass instead, nails pressing tiny crescents in the cloth of my dress, and I let it go. I moved my chair back just enough to ease the pressure at my knees, the leg catching on the rug before sliding free. The scrape muffled. I set the glass down, slow, felt the ring it left cool under my fingertips. The laughter stayed warm at the center. Light gathered there in pools of yellow, spilling wide but fading before it reached me. My reflection in the sideboard glass blurred, her shape clear, mine falling behind it, washed out by the crosshatch of shadows. There was a moment my mouth shaped words. Slow, not even sound. Just the hush of breath making room. Once. But it frayed before it finished, caught on nothing, lost in the murmur of silverware and soft voices, in the steady candle that didn't flicker. I watched the way the light held her steady, left me at its rim, edges softened to nothing, the room bending to fit around her, and somewhere the mirror caught us both, but only one of us was clear. I felt the weight shift as the server moved past me, tray balanced just so, eyes meeting mine for a moment longer than he needed. Not hurried, not forced, just there. A quiet hold before he dipped his head, placing the glass gently in front of me without the small thud I'd grown used to. Fingers releasing slow, steady, pulling back without sound. The linen caught a fold of his cuff, and he smoothed it flat with the edge of his hand, the crease settling like it had always been there. I let my fingers rest at the base of the glass, the condensation gathering against my skin, and a chill that felt cleaner somehow. His gaze didn't flinch, didn't skip, just rested once more before moving on, coat brushing the chair behind me with a muted hush. Behind us, the voices stayed bright, skipping over my name with a clipped edge, someone saying her, then letting it drift, laughter bridging the gap so no one noticed. He called me ma'am when he stopped, quiet but firm, nothing grand, just the word with its own small weight. The sound caught for a breath between other people's jokes, the syllable crisp enough to settle in the air before the next glass was lifted in cheer. I saw the way he nudged the empty chair closer to the table edge, straightening it so it matched the line of the others, fingers adjusting the napkin with a slow press that made it look deliberate, like it belonged. My thumb traced the edge of my own napkin, smoothing it in one line, then letting it wrinkle again, my breathing low enough to hear the fabric shift. Someone behind me was laughing about a story I half remembered. The name's wrong, the ending retold with a twist I didn't recognize. The sound fell in layers around me. My chair edged back enough to blur the pattern of the carpet at my feet, the light from the chandelier bending to reach but not settle. I held the glass where he'd set it, watching the reflection in the curve of its side. Faces caught and warped, his back already moving away, the candle flickering once along the rim before settling. My eyes drifted down to the table, caught the way the light landed on the napkin. He'd folded clean, the crease a single bright line in the soft spill of gold. My fingers resting just beside it, not moving, just there, breathing slow. I caught their eyes for a breath, light slipping across one side of their face, the other sunk in soft shadow, mouth curving in a half smile that didn't reach, words for someone else falling low and easy, laughter stitched around it, but none landing easy. Laughter stitched around it, but none landing here, the sound folding at the edges. I didn't call their name, didn't shift forward, only held the look long enough to feel my own lashes tremble. Breath caught too high in my chest before it fell back quiet. They leaned a fraction, weight over one leg, the fabric of their sleeve creased at the elbow, fingers tapping once against the glass they held without noticing, voice warm but turned away, the joke rolling from their lips into the space between us and bouncing back empty. Light traced a narrow line down their shoulder, catching the curve of bone, then dropping away, leaving the side of their neck in dust. I watched the shadows wrap them slow, the chandelier glow brushing them gold where I wasn't. I felt the scrape of memory in the bend of their wrist, the way it had once settled across the back of a chair, fingers tapping in thought, a small nod that closed doors without slamming them. Elbows drawn in tight, as if to keep something from spilling, the dull ring of a spoon landing too hard on a plate, the hush that followed, a cough someone tried to hide, the lamplight casting long across the floor, and folding us up in them, a noise that wasn't laughter, but filled the... My fingers loosened around the napkin I hadn't meant to hold, the fabric soft from use, folding without shape when I let it fall against my leg, the edge brushing my knee. I watched their face turn slightly, catching the glow, eyes narrowing just enough to see detail but not question, my own gaze lowering to the shine on the table, the reflection of a glass half full, warped where the wood dipped. My shoulders settled back, the line of my spine pressing into the chair I hadn't left yet. No one called out, no hand caught my sleeve. The space between us neither closed nor stretched, just sat there waiting, and I let my breath out slow, letting it slip into the sounds of silver against china, the uneven rhythm of a chair shifting, a laugh falling flat when it crossed the distance. I pressed my palm once against the seat before rising just enough to ease it back in line, the legs finding their marks, the cushion flattening quiet, leaving the frame even, centered, empty under the steady glow of the overhead light. I stepped just far enough in to see the table lit in warm pools, the overhead fixture casting that old gold I remembered, soft across the plates, highlighting the careful folds of napkins I used to press flat with the edge of my thumb. The pattern's still there, but dulled, a slight fray at the corner I'd stitched once, now tucked so no one would notice. The head chair angled just so, legs squared to the edge, the cushion smoothed, no trace of weight left behind. My eyes traced the frame on the wall, the photo I'd taken, the glass reflecting more light than image now, their faces lined up in easy familiarity. No gap, no space held open. The old wine glass with its hairline crack was gone, replaced by a set that caught the chandelier glow in perfect symmetry. I felt the air shift as someone leaned in, laughter turning the sound warm, rolling along the wood floor and bouncing back in layered echoes. She sat there now, elbows resting with confidence, voice cutting clean through the chatter, name called twice in the same breath, once in greeting, once in thanks. No hesitation. A fork clinked gently against her plate, a small polite noise of agreement, heads nodding in a subtle wave that made the chairs creak, bodies leaning toward her orbit without noticing. The space made sense around her, plates and silver, arranged to catch her hands easily, the light bending across her cheek without question. No one paused at my edge of the room, no glance breaking off to find me in the softer shadow, no name said halfway and dropped. I watched as a hand reached to refill her glass, fingers brushing the rim with care before releasing, the wine catching a glow I couldn't hold. The overhead bulb flickered once, the filament buzzing before steadying, light hugging the middle of the table, leaving the walls in a cool dim. My palm rested against the table edge for a moment, the wood solid underskin that felt cooler than the room deserved, fingers splaying once before curling back. I let them fall to my side, brushing the fold of my coat without pulling it closer. My gaze dropped to the floor, watching the line of light split across the rug, one side bright enough to hold color, the other dulling it to gray. I eased a half step back, enough to feel the shadows gather at my ribs, my shoulders. No one turned, no voice called, the laughter rolling on without break, filling the room in a low hum that skipped over the space I left empty, the chair holding its shape at the head of the table, cushion still smoothed flat, arms welcoming, the light settling on it like it belonged there all along. I sat with my back just enough away from the table to feel the edge of the cloth slip against my ribs, fingers resting on the fold of my napkin, smoothing it flat without looking. The room held its breath a moment too long before the mic crackled, someone clearing their throat, voice warm, steady, carrying clear. They started naming the small things, the arranging, the planning, the way the evening ran smooth. Each detail lending quiet and deliberate, sounding too exact not to be true. I felt my spine straighten half an inch, eyes lifting, catching the slow drift of light that pooled along the middle of the table, watching the glow hold, waiting. The name came then, bright, proud, not mine. It filled the space between us, echoed in the wooden beams overhead before settling low in my chest, heavy. The voice paused to let it sink in, words repeating for effect, for clarity, for the clapping that answered without missing a beat, a clean, even percussion that couldn't be stopped once it started. My fingers stilled on the napkin, the crease holding sharp, thumb pressing too hard at the corner. I heard the glassware rattle with the applause, saw the person standing in that light smile, dipping their head just enough to catch the praise, eyes shining. The microphone clicked once more as if to seal it. The name said again, slower this time, as though it deserved the space. The laughter folded around it, warm, practiced, sealing every edge so nothing could slip through. Across from me, I caught an eye. A shift, small, just enough for our gaze to meet, held for a fraction that felt longer, the lashes fluttering down, mouth pulling tight. I saw the way their fingers tapped once against the armrest before they turned their face away. Head bending to join the rhythm of the clapping, palms coming together with the others in soft agreement. The light brushed them as it turned, catching hair, cheekbone, before leaving me in the quieter glow at the edge. My hand eased off the napkin, fingertips trailing the weave before falling to my lap. I let the glass stay where it was, the wine unmoved, catching only a stray reflection from the overhead bulb, throwing its red onto the cloth in a dull patch that looked brown at the edges. I exhaled slow, mouth barely parting. Breath caught against my teeth, closed again without sound. The clapping went on, not loud, just steady even, like rain ticking on an old roof. Unbroken, uncaring. I didn't move to stand or speak. My fingers pressed once more to the linen, flattening nothing. The light didn't follow, staying warm where it was needed, where it landed with purpose, leaving me to watch the way the glow held firm around someone else's name. I stood slowly, the chair easing back with a dull scrape that no one turned to hear, cloth of my coat brushing against my side, settling as I shifted weight from one foot to the other, shoulders loosening without warning, air moving across the nape of my neck in a thin line as I stepped away from the table's glow. The light dimmed as I left it behind, not fading but drawing a clear edge I didn't cross again. I walked without hurry, heels quiet against the floor, fabric catching faint drafts that cooled my wrist, fingers flexing to adjust the sleeve that fell too low. No voice called, no question hung, only the hush of the door opening just wide enough to let me through. A sigh of warm air from inside brushing past me to greet the cold. I paused at the threshold, breathing once before pushing on, letting it close behind me with a soft click. Through the glass I could see them, moving in rhythm I no longer followed. Faces turned toward one another, eyes bright, laughter scattering in pockets of light that held them close, unmoved by the gap left at the table's edge. My own reflection caught at the margin of the pane, a blur among sharper shapes, half lit by the spill of chandeliers behind me, hair shifting across my cheek as I leaned a fraction forward, then stilled. I rested my hand on the rail outside, metal cool, unmoving, fingers spreading and flattening before lifting away, leaving no trace. The wind tugged at the hem of my coat, gentle, not urgent, pressing fabric to my calves and easing away. I let my gaze drop, catching the outline of my shoes scuffed against the concrete, shadows stretching long, bending at angles I didn't correct. My breath came slow, fogging once before thinning, chest lowering without protest, mouth closed soft around no words. The glass door behind me held its light steady, glowing warm on the inside, fading at the edges where I stood. I let my fingers drift down the seam of my coat, smoothing it once before they fell to my side. I didn't turn back, didn't lean closer, only let the final breath leave quiet, shoulders slackening as the wind moved on, leaving the door closed, the laughter muted. My shape edged in the last strip of light before it settled into the darker line of the wall behind me. I was standing near the edge of the room, air settling heavy in the pause between laughter, the glass door closing behind me with a soft seal. The light from inside spilled onto the floor in a narrow wedge, warm, slow, stopping just shy of my shoes. That was when I felt a shift, small, someone stepping close enough for the scent of their coat to catch, wool and cold air, the hush of shoes against polished wood. They didn't clear their throat or announce anything, just said it low, like they'd remembered it for themselves first. "You always called it the quiet corner," they murmured, words rolling out almost apologetic, eyes not quite on mine but somewhere near, catching the edge of my shoulder. It wasn't loud enough to turn heads, but I heard every syllable. My fingers froze around the fabric of my coat, breath holding like I was afraid it would rattle, eyes blinking slow, as if the lids weighed too much. I didn't answer, didn't even shift my feet. but the floor felt unsteady for a moment, the room pressing and quiet at the edges. My gaze drifted sideways, not meeting theirs, scanning the line where the wall met the ceiling, tracing the seam of shadow. I caught them glancing back once, lips parting like they might add more, but closing just as fast, eyes darting down, settling on their own hands. The silence between us widened, filled with the sound of glass clinking in the next room, laughter threading through it. Muffled, soft, unchanged, my grip on the coat loosened, fingers uncurling slow, the fabric sliding against my palm, before I pressed it flat against my side. I exhaled quiet, mouth closing gently over no words. The air moved once across my face, stirring a strand of hair, catching the corner of my eye with light reflected off the door's glass. I didn't turn away, didn't step forward. My gaze settled long enough to see their outline blur in the pane, see my own shape gather at the edges, dark, faint, but there. My fingers twitched once at my side, the smallest squeeze, letting go just as quick. The light inside shifted, caught on the glass, brushed the curve of my cheek without warning, before it faded back to the softer glow that left both of us half lit, half seen. A server passed behind me, tray balanced steady, but one file folder slid off the edge with a dull slap against the floor. He froze for half a breath, bending quick, fingers pinching it closed before it opened, but the cover tilted just enough for the letters to catch the light. The line of text, my name, formal, precise. Below it the title printed in clear block, Director. He straightened, head lowering a fraction too much, voice caught in the quiet between conversations. Director, he said low, offering it back without meeting my eyes. The word landed wrong in the room, like glass cracked under pressure. A knife paused mid-slice. The hush spread from the center outward. The scrape of forks dulled. Laughter nodded in a half-choke before stopping altogether. Heads turned in slow unison, necks craning, faces blinking in the amber light, seeing me sharper than they ever had. Someone shifted in their seat, the sound of fabric rubbing loud against the silence, eyes trying not to look and failing. I felt the air fold around me, tighter, but clearer. Fingers resting on the table didn't retreat, just held there, knuckles whitening then easing again. My gaze moved once, unhurried, touching theirs without flinching. Eyelids heavy but open, unblinking. The hush held like breath caught between teeth. Their stares weren't mocking now. I watched the tilt of chins, the way someone's mouth opened a crack and shut without sound. The quick glance exchanged across the table, question buried too deep to say. The spotlight seemed to burn wider, flattening every line on their faces, throwing mine into relief. The shadow behind me neat and whole on the wall. I let the file rest where it landed, didn't reach to reclaim it. My hand lowered slow, fingers brushing the linen before laying flat, palm open. The wine glass in front of me stayed untouched, catching the candle's glow at its rim, a rim of reflected flame, bending quiet in its curve. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. My chin lifted a fraction, the room waiting. My eyes held steady. Nothing more. I rose slowly, chair scraping just enough to hush the low talk, fabric of my dress shifting against wood. No one stopped me. Heads turned in small jerks, eyes dropping, sliding away before they met mine. I saw shoulders edge back, elbows pull in, the space parting not from welcome but from uncertainty. A fork settled onto porcelain with a sound too clear, someone's breath catching before releasing in a quieter tone. If anyone said my name, it was softer now, clipped, as if tasting how it felt different on their tongue. I heard it once, not a command, but a question, voice low, unsteady. I didn't turn. My fingers smoothed the line of my skirt, nails brushing the seam before falling still. The path between chairs cleared in slow motion, their gaze caught on the floor, on the tablecloth, on anything but the line I walked. I paused at the edge, where the light thinned, the linen napkin in my hand folded clean along its old crease. I laid it down with care, square to the plate I wouldn't touch again. The stem of the wineglass stayed full, its surface catching the shine of the chandelier, light bending and splintering in deep reds that never reached my lips. My hand hovered once over the rim, fingers pulling back without contact. Someone shifted, clearing their throat. The sound rang in the hush, bouncing off glass, dying in thick carpet. I didn't answer them. I didn't invite the question to form. My eyes met theirs only long enough to hold them there, unblinking, letting the silence say everything. When I moved again, it was with no apology. My heel met the floor with a steady, muted tap, the hem of my coat trailing the polished edge of the table. I felt the draft of the door crack open, wind nudging the fabric around my knees, cool air threading past ankles, lifting loose hair from my neck. The light caught in the glass pane just enough to reflect me back in outline only. Darker than the room I left. No voice followed. No hand reached. I didn't look back. I let the sound of silverware resuming come slowly, forced, uneven. The laughter picked up in shallow bursts, strained in its return. My napkins stayed on the table, folded neat. My glass stayed full. The chair I'd left angled precisely, empty in the glow they kept for themselves. I didn't need to tell them anything. The room said enough.